Okay,
Looks like we are all live.
I'm live.
All right. Do you want to
Perfect.
kick us off, Dirk?
Yes, so nice to see you, Elsa. Nice to see you, Kodah. For the ones who are joining us, this is a continuation of our conversation. Last time with Elsa, we were talking about how we would like to see business differently, or how you would like to approach doing business differently. And Elsa, in that conversation, remembered another entrepreneur friend of hers. And then this is us coming together. This is my first time meeting Koda as well. And for the ones who are meeting us for the first time, I think it makes sense to start with a brief introduction by sharing our intentions and then starting the flow and hopefully holding the space for whatever is supposed to emerge from this get together. Would that be fine?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds perfect.
Oh, I'm handing it over to you, Koda.
Okay, sure. So a little bit about who I am. I have been a serial entrepreneur for almost a decade. Started off in cooperatives, cafes, event spaces, bookstores. Learned a lot about collaboration communication. And then I did a roll-up of nonprofits in an alliance and learned a lot about the politics of that, did some lobbying for social policies that I'll get into, primarily in the transgender community and around harm reduction and anti-human trafficking. And then I took a step away from the fire of direct service and moved into building tools for those social workers. So my first company was a government software platform for client management, homeless services, mental health services. And then after some time, I stepped into the root cause of those social ailments being people disembodied. So I built a consumer wearable device design firm called Soyana, which helped people with these biometrics of dysregulation and help people train themselves to listen to their bodies more. And I wanted to make those beautiful with jewelry that had sensors and whatnot, this marriage of data and adornment. The company was called Soyana, which means hope. From there, the pandemic started happening, and I did some consulting for governments as needed, and then moved into venture capital and private equity. Did some work in psychedelics and mindfulness technologies, some roll-ups there, and then moved into private equity, fund of funds work, and learned a whole lot about how deals get done. And there's been an undercurrent throughout that whole journey of my spiritual work. And 15 years plus meditating with Zen meditation, studying Kundalini for about a decade. And then I encountered ceremonial indigenous technologies. So worked with ethnobotanicals and with Wiharika, with Santo Daime, and then ultimately found myself in the Amazon rainforest studying with the Ashaninka, and living there for about a month, and then I got invited to the Yawanawa Sacred Village, where I studied under Putani and Pau. I got to make hape and things. And from there, I was invited to join with the Lakota in their sun dance. So I'm now a third-year sun dancer, and we can go into what that means. So with that undercurrent, I currently find myself bringing real spiritual clarity and embodiment into entrepreneurship. I'm focused on clean energy, transportation, and fuels, and then on teams and communication. So if that's the executives and their communication, leadership, energy management, or the teams and their group coherence and flow within these domains. So that's all clearly informed by the inner work and reflection. And I met Elsa at a Jack Cornfield 6-day silent meditation retreat in Topanga, California. And we've become great friends, got to see each other on the playa a little bit. And I'm really looking forward to connecting with you here, Dork, and going a little bit deeper and seeing what emerges.
Wow. Thank you. Such a diverse experience. To me, it's literally the unity. Like you started from one end and all the way back.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I can clearly see how you are bringing different strengths, and I can already feel the embodiment. So thank you for sharing story and looking into some of the emerging things. I think this will be a fruitful, long conversation. Elsa, if it's okay, I will go next, and probably I will invite you to share your story, which can be our starting point for flowing into this conversation too. So I will try to keep my side of the story a little bit short. So I'm also coming from an artistic plus scientific background. I was more of an artistic child when I was growing up, mostly into poetry, dancing, painting, but I was also so curious to anything and everything related to science as well. So the starting part of my journey, I started with the scientific paths. Get my education in engineering. After that, had an MBA, and mostly practiced my integration of art and science. And to me, it's really the dualities of the world by bringing those two sides together in the form of creating new products and experiences. So I primarily worked in big multinational organizations. Two of them, biotech, Genentech and Roche, and then Elsevier. And there was, I think, one common theme in both of them, like bringing new products and solutions to the market and hopefully being at the cutting edge of innovation by bringing more of the things that I think our world needs and desires. And quite recently, I made a jump out of the corporate world to my own explorations. And I think my primary intention for that is really bringing more alignment, integrity, and embodiment into the way that I create as well. Of course, within the boundaries of a corporate world, you still have some limitations. And with what's happening in the world, I felt like I'm not exercising all of my strengths and creativity. And I felt like I can bring more beauty into the world in my own terms by aligning myself with the like-hearted and like-minded individuals. And when I was thinking and talking about what might be the next step, and a beauty concept emerged. And that's actually how I speak about this transition that I'm going through. So to me, beauty is the unity in our diversity. And when you look into the world, it's literally being your authentic self within the unity of all. I truly believe that we are all unique. We all have our unique gifts that we are supposed to give back to the world, and that brings our purpose and our existence. But also, we are united in our hearts. And to me, innovation literally means entrepreneurship, really means how can we bring more of our unity and diversity in the form of beautiful products and companies back into the world. And to be able to do that, I think we need to ignite the power of our hearts. And I'm also thinking and talking a lot about love and business, beauty and business, these two concepts that doesn't seem to be going hand in hand, but I think it needs to be at the center of creation. I think we forget about why business exists in the world. It's really supposed to bring more love, more unity, more consciousness, and more beauty in our worlds. And when I talk about love in business, when I open love, it's actually living organizations valuing existence. I feel like because we are so fragmented and disconnected in our consciousness at this stage of the world, we are creating so much fragmentation. And I truly believe that business has a healing power in our world because of its strengths in terms of organizational power it holds in society today. And as founders, as future innovators, if we can really create products with that love and beauty at the center, we can create beautiful cultures. Through those cultures, we can impact families, employees, and through the products, we can impact society. So my intention is to be a messenger, embodiment, a coach, and advisor for everything around this intention. How can we bring all of ourselves and all of our humanity back to business? And how can we really help us to be the embodiment of that love and beauty we would like to see more in the world? That's the journey that I am in.
Thank you, Tarek.
Handing over to you, Elsa.
Wow. I love some emerging themes that you guys are both speaking of, and spirituality and business and venture really as a vehicle of creation of life, and expressed in the times that we live in now. And when you talk about love and beauty, like, I think a lot of the things that the way I would describe myself right now is today I'm very much a mother in this particular day, because I have a 3-year-old who has a high fever and her papa is with her right now. And this morning, I woke up resisting the idea that I have a podcast recording and my child is going to be crying at some point. And I just realizing like how much of my part of myself is still like saying, oh, that there's a former me who doesn't have a child and I'm all business. I'm like, get things done. And there's a part of me who's this mother who loves being this sanctuary for my child. When she's sick, like I drop everything to hold her and look into her and just be with the chaos that's within. And how is that role today cast as such an opposite of what the rest of the world is doing in business and all of that? It's just like, oh, that's not an activity you can measure output from.
Yeah.
And so I was like feeling a little bit of that conflicting in me this morning. It was like, oh, what do I do? And I realized I can do it all, do it both. And so right now I'm bringing this mother with a sick child into this podcast. And perhaps that could be, something to be in the backdrop of our discussion. And I have experience in business. I was a management consultant, and then I met Daruk at Harvard Business School, and we became friends and kept in touch forever. I started my own company, and then it failed. It was in the startup world. Learned a lot about myself, what I couldn't let go of, and then I become a mother. And it keeps coming up to me in my mind when I think about healing. When people make a business out of healing, what if we make healing out of business? Like, what if business can be healing? Instead of drawing a little corner of business and say, that's the healing part. You do this sound bath and pay $40 to go there, and which in itself has its own purpose in the world. And what if business itself is healing? And then we don't have the dichotomy anymore. Not the dichotomy that I felt this morning, like, oh, I go into a video podcast and I cannot be a mother. But what if I'm embodying that already? And I can show up in the podcast as this sanctuary, and I can show up downstairs when I'm done. And so today I'm very much a mother.
All is welcome. Thank you for bringing all of you, Elsa.
Thank you.
So just the conversation started, and what I propose is really maybe bringing some of the previous conversations. And Kodah, I would like to invite you to share your own experience. So last time when we were discussing with Elsa, I was sharing that I'm currently looking into early stage founder space and investor space and trying to understand what are the needs from a founder side in terms of their operational needs, but they're also psychological needs in terms of dealing with the challenges of venture world. And I was speaking with lots of female entrepreneurs, and they were telling me quite a lot of different stories compared to the ones that I heard from male counterparts. They were saying that sometimes they have to be a little bit more masculine in nature, and they are being challenged in ways that they don't feel like they are at par with the male colleagues. Like they have to insert more logic, justify most of the assumptions, and they feel like they have to articulate more because most of the things are questioned and challenged. So there were quite a lot of emotional elements. They also felt like, of course, they're maybe as females, we might be a little bit more sensitive. There were a lot of questions about self-worth or challenges about whether I have what it takes on the emotional side. But on the rational side as well, what I was hearing was a lot of assumptions and judgments that I didn't hear was coming loud and clear from some of the male founders that I had the chance to work with. So, and when I was speaking about the section with Elsa, she immediately made this connection, like, I know the perfect person who is the embodiment of the challenges. So would you like to maybe share a little bit more about your own journey and your own reflections about what it might mean to be a maybe female founder or a male founder in this world that we live in today?
Yes, thank you for opening that up. So I mentioned on the intro that I worked in the transgender community. So that was the story there is a little longer, depending on how much time we have. But after college, I traveled the world, one-way tickets for about 3-4 years, and I encountered these gender diverse cultures that all had an honorable social role for gender expansion. The doulas, the healers, the mystics, all were doing something with embodiment that was outside of that reproductive relationship, and had very different relationships to polarity itself. And that was the judges as well in Indonesia, the Bisu, that was the Hijra in India, that was so many different, the shamans in Ethiopia, the Mahu Mahu in Hawaii. And then I came back to the United States, and there was this whole transgender tipping point. So I found strong affinity with that community, and had aspects of myself in that. You know, I'm Italian American, my family is Sicilian, and maybe the conservative post-World War II blueprints for gender didn't quite fit. So as I started to express that which I had repressed in my childhood, I slowly moved into a feminine expression, and then ultimately medicalized that and did the whole journey of surgical and hormonal transformation, and did 7 years or 6.5 years living as a female, socially, and legally, right? All the documents changed and everything. But what was interesting experientially is, you know, when your body shifts, and you say, to make it real, walking home from a restaurant or a bar late at night on the street, and they no longer want my phone or my wallet, they wanted my body. And so it was a very different lived experience in the social contract. Then when it got to entrepreneurship, and I was, nonprofits made sense, but when I started shifting into like a venture-backed startup and government software, I would be pitching investors, and you know, at that time I had like, I was stereotypically, I think, attractive, right? I had I looked healthy and intelligent, and I was talking about value, and I had a really strong conviction and a strong business case for what we were building, the value that it would provide financially and socially. But the questions I would get from investors would be like, "Where did you get that shirt?" or "What, you know, who does your hair?" And it's just things that were totally unrelated. And I realized there was some kind of breakdown in authority related to gender. Now I know through my work with the Flow Genome Project, there's this tool we use called the trust equation, where we take credibility, reliability, and empathy, and we divide that by self-orientation, and that equals trust. So I would posit that in a feminine expression, or when I was living as a woman, I had high empathy, my teams were really aligned. I had the reliability of doing what I say I would do, but for whatever reason, the calculus around credibility was off. And I had to overcome that hurdle because of the social biases of the listeners, namely the investors. So I had a higher hurdle to clear to establish credibility. And then even my self-orientation was very towards other, towards group, towards purpose. So even though those scores were high, the calculus didn't always pencil out. And I'm saying the same things now, but now I've got a little bit of facial hair, and I'm reintroduced testosterone in my system, and I'm living as a man and working in that space. And I'm saying the same thing, but people are listening and asking where they can insert money. So it's a very, very different experience, and I'm happy to speak from my experience in that space, although it's not fully commensurate with a natal female or a cisgender female. You know, but there were still some considerations when my hormones were very different. Somatic awareness is very different. Emotional experience is entirely different. Communication is entirely different. And I can talk at length about those nuances, but just to button it up, the entrepreneurial journey, it's just has historically been led by men, and that bringing women into that space, yeah, we can try to contort females into masculine corporate hierarchies, or we can value feminine aspects of people in organizations, and not force women to masculinize, actually honor some of the feminine traits in leadership. And I encourage, and I know there are investors who think that way. So I encourage women not to overly compensate to achieve credibility, rather to achieve credibility by defining culture that supports the feminine.
Wow. Thank you for openness, and thank you for the invitation. From my side, I can only echo some of the sentiments that you shared, although it's a different context. I think even in the professional context, I received similar kind of judgment in my own professional life, especially in the earlier stages of my own journey. I was also questioning myself, like, because I was getting quite a lot of compliments, the way that I look and how pretty I am, which is inappropriate in a professional setting enough itself, but that was also making me question whether I am actually bringing real value in the context of professional world. And I was literally doubling down in terms of my intelligence and trying to bring more of myself or more of the masculine dimension, literally just to compensate that judgment or that perception. And in the venture world, when I'm speaking with some of the female founders, they're also replicating the similar kind of dilemma that they are facing. Very similar to my professional experience, very similar to what you shared. They would like to really prove themselves, and maybe just as a way to prove themselves, they're also doubling down in terms of that mental dimension too much, like over justification, just to build more credibility. So what I was feeling from their side was really they are carrying 2 times more burden just to justify their credibility, just to prove that they are physically attractive or beautiful, yet they're smart and they're credible enough to get the stuff done. But I think I also loved your invitation. The best way to mitigate any kind of fragmentation in the world is literally be the unity in ourselves and be the embodiment of that in the world, and hopefully connect to the right context and spaces that can honor that integrity within us and see that integrity within us too. So thank you for that beautiful reflection. Elsa, do you have any reflections from your side?
There's a little anecdote. My husband went to TechCrunch Disrupt last month. It was in San Francisco. We live in the Bay Area, and he'd never been. I mean, we've watched, TV show making fun of it, and I've been. I was like, I'm done with that. Like, you go. And he didn't know why I was so turned off. And then he went there and was like, oh, I see. And then he came back. He was like, well, it's mostly white guys, yeah. Some women, but the ones who are pitching, they have really low voices. That was like his most kind of authentic report back, like nothing prejudice. He's German. He doesn't get the political correctness of the US. But I think he was saying something about the women who were pitching. They're the ones in the battlefield. They call it battlefield, right?
Yeah.
The pitching competition.
But it is.
Yeah, and he noticed why are the women all speaking so low? And that was a moment I like when you mentioned that, this over masculinization, whatever it's called, of ourselves, of female bodies to try to, but then at the same time, some people want to retain the sex appeal. So it's kind of putting it all together, but not quite in unity, in your words. And I was even wondering, and recently my husband, he got a new job, and we were negotiating his salary, and I was just advising him on how to negotiate. And he was like, whoa, you're really good at this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good at this when I'm helping someone else. I'm not very good when I negotiate for myself. And then I got reminded of this study. I think it was actually when we were HBS, they told us about it, that men and women negotiate their own salary. There was some percentage, men on average got 20% more in the outcome, and women get less, right? Everyone knows that study. It was oh yeah, we're not so good at advocating for ourselves. And then the professor did a follow-up and said, what if you negotiate salary for your best friend? And men negotiating for the best friend versus women negotiating for the best friend. Obviously, this is generalization, right? It's just numbers crunched together. Women, on average, got a higher outcome for the best friend than the men for the best friend. And I guess what the spirit of that is we just have different roles in a different expression and energies. And, when when I think about the venture role, in TechCrunch, everyone is supposed to homogenize to this one archetype of the perfect unicorn founder. And there's only one way this unicorn look. And so men grab onto this image and women trying to look like that. And so there's only one person. And what I think about, what about a team? What if the woman takes on the role that enables a man to do his best, and the man take on his role for them, and men or women, or like, female, male identifying energies doing that. So like, instead of saying the woman needs to like lower their voice in their pitching, what if there is a way to like embrace both and work as a team, not as an individual? Because in the US, we all talk about individual being the hero. And so we dissolve ourselves into team, into the collective. There's no need for one person to be the unicorn. Everyone can be the unicorn. So that was an image that was showing up to me. It was like, why do we always just think about individuals? Because we can't have it all in one person.
Wow. That's a powerful unfolding there too. And just to clarify, since you mentioned this feminine and masculine dimension, I know that those are sensitive words, and depending on who is listening, it might mean different things. I think it makes sense to describe what we mean by it. I think we might have a similar definition. We are, as human beings, a combination of some feminine and masculine energies. These are literal two sides of the creation energies, and one of them is a little bit more expressive, externally driven, more bringing things to life, and the other one is a little bit more unity oriented, holding the space, the darker side, the one that really enables that creation to happen, more of the feminine side. And I think what we are referring here is really we as human beings are a combination of those energies, and we can exercise both of those energies. And some female body representation might have more dominant the masculine energy, which is actually what we see in most of the leaders in the business world, unfortunately, because that really necessitates our exercise of masculine energies more. But what we are thinking is a little bit different than gender. I think what we are trying to discuss here is really how can we honor two sides of humanity together. And this could be embodied in a female body, and this could be embodied in a masculine body too. And I think, Elsa, your opening, and Kodah, your invitation, bringing more of the things that we would love to see more in the world, the embodiment, is also making me remember a different definition of power is needed, I think, in the way that we operate in the business world too. Because Elsa, to your point, like, I think the way that we see power embodied in the business world today is a little bit more inclined with the only masculine energy, the one who has the loudest voice, the charisma, and pretty much the power to execute things, maybe to the detriment of the unity, the team, the company, the culture, and the society. They are the ones winning, and that's how we affiliate the power. And we feel like if we lose that power, if we connect to our hearts, if we let that feminine, team-oriented, society-oriented, nature, unity-oriented side lead, we feel like it's going to be to the detriment of power, and we're just going to get into chaos, and we're not going to win collectively. To me, it's really how can, like Elsa, you said, how can we combine both of them and maybe bring more of the feminine style of leadership to the business and honor that style of leadership too? Because I also personally have quite a lot of experiences when I was mostly exercising my dominant the masculine side just to compensate some of the things like I described in terms of the judgment. I was playing according to rules of the game, but I was feeling like something is not right. Whenever I had more internal balance through lots of spiritual practice and grounding and different ways of bringing that unity in me, I realized that that was not really perceived well in the corporate context that I was operating in, because I was perceived to be soft. But to me, it was a different kind of power. It was a more enabling power. It was a power that was really holding the space for transformation to happen, for collective transformation to happen. And I'm not so sure whether we are actually opening up that space healthily when we are thinking and talking about business. With that, I would like to invite you to share your reflections if anything resonates in this context.
Yeah, a lot's coming up there. And just to even ground the language, and I'm not sensitive. I've been in that landmine of social justice, identity politics for long enough to know how to navigate. And ultimately, there are just objective differences in our bodies, and it'd be foolish to not honor them. And I don't think that the optimal, like, prototypic future has a dissolution of gender by any means. I think in many ways there's even an honoring of the inner technologies of our bodies and the differences therein, which is critical to good, healthy relationships. which is then critical to healthy business outcomes. And that connective force of feminine awareness in holding teams together means teams will go further. If you're doing mergers and acquisitions, it's a psychology game. Yes, there's diligence and there's metrics that determine a good deal, but whether that goes down is ultimately to the people involved. And it is the act of acquiring and retaining and developing talent that creates value over time. So that is a very feminine source of power, to be able to hold that talent, steward that talent, see that talent, and then ensure the trust of your team. So the just a useful piece here in the difference. When I was injecting estrogen, there are somatic changes, subcutaneous fat changes, which increases your sensitivity to your environment, the wind, the temperature of the room, and also the resonance of others. So when I was in groups of women, as a woman talking, it was very much this circular conversation of awareness that then spiraled towards the thing that was to be said. Whereas when I'm in masculine conversations with other men, it's very much the strategic, the ontological scaffolding, the ideas and how they stack together, and then how we push those outward. And that's the male energy down and out, the female energy up and incubate, right? And then birth. It's a very different system. And even you look at natal development, when we're developing that, as these insulin growth factors, the endocrine system starts developing, skeletal development, muscle development, that androgens or testosterones emboss the forehead, deepen the jaw, so branches don't scratch you. We develop our entire body, like bigger hands, bigger rib cages, to have outward movement, action, and that just scaffolds onto our psychology and then our ideology. So these differences are valuable, not to be mitigated. And not to say that any one human has the extreme polarity of either of these. We all have both, but there's a place for these masculine traits that is in right expression. And there's a place for these feminine traits that's in right expression, that are both in relationship key to power. And this is a difference in being those healthy teams, being those healthy cultures, and then having value flow through, as opposed to forcing it and doing it, right? We feel the flow, we don't force the feel, and this is a key piece. But I think women are critical in business, and to value the work that is being done by women in business right now, and then maybe de-emphasizing some of the chaotic risk that comes from men being too masculine in business, and steamrolling through and over leveraging stakeholders. So there's some language in World Economic Forum talks about stakeholder capitalism. That's an attempt at quantifying the value of stakeholders and the impacts of around the supply chains and the life cycle of products. That's a good starting point, but I think underneath of that, it's culture. And right now, when we can automate just about everything, why are you working with someone else when we can just do it all with AI workers? The why is because we go further together. The why is because we're still human, and that makes it necessary that men and women are in this together, so we maintain and preserve our humanness in the value we're delivering. So I just wanted to deliver that piece about the relationship, the actual differences, and then the value of us all being together.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know if they want to jump in there. There's another piece on when we're actually stewarding the gendered energies of our bodies. And as a man, I have responsibility not to fight honorable fights, to when I've developed a deeper capacity to do things in the world, the overdoing at a certain point becomes violence, right? So there's something about wrapping that sword around a code of honor and only engaging in honorable competition that tapers masculinity. And then the femininity, when I was living as a woman, I attracted a lot of attention, I attracted a lot of appreciation, and knowing how to then wield it. There were cases where I attracted unwanted attention and had no idea what to do with it. Right? I was dressed as a beautiful woman walking in the world, and people were looking at me, and I thought that I was talking to them about investment, but really they were interested in me personally and human, right? As a maybe a sexual partner. And I had to find that difference through experience. And I think a lot of female founders would relate to that. But there's responsibility of wielding both these energies that I think comes from having good mentors and comes from having, really, really trusting those mentors so we can train not to be reckless with our gifts.
George, do you have a question? Because I have
Yeah.
a question too.
Yes, please.
Wow, I think I have two questions follow on and inviting Kodah and Daruk too. But recently my husband and I did some tantric coaching, and one exercise is like sitting in this like position where she asks us to like visualize my energy giving love from my heart, and then like my husband receiving it, and he's receiving, and then I receive his energy through my sacral chakra, and that kind of like let me like to be reminded of I don't know if it's a theory or someone who said that women are actually very young with their emotions and more yin with the body, like sexually, and man is the opposite. I don't know if it's true. It resonates with me when I heard that. So like men, when men women talking, like I can relate to what Kodah is saying. Like, yeah, are they interested in talking to me because there's a sexual agenda in the back? Because women, I don't have that experience of like, let me talk to this person, just like have that intention. It's more like, oh, I want to feel into like how he's feeling, and so like it's easier for me to be young about my feelings. Sometimes when it goes to the extreme, it leads to manipulation. It leads to a lot of unhealed wounds, or like just overwhelming the person. And so like women are more yang with their emotions and more yin with their sexuality, and then men is the opposite. And I don't know if it's true, but it's interesting that this is the way, is this the way it is? Then there's a beautiful circle. There's a giving and a receiving. And how can we make that giving and receiving sacred instead of like, oh, I don't want it, like unwanted, that, and Kodah mentioned a few times, because I felt that like, oh, I don't want that. And maybe my husband sometimes like, Elsa, you just too overwhelmed right now. I don't want your emotional vomiting in front of me. I don't want that. How can we all tune into like the true nature of this and not go to the extreme so that people felt like this is crossing certain energetic boundaries? And then the other thing I was curious about, and maybe Kodah can speak to your personal experience, when you speak of like the somatic changes, you're more tuned in. I wonder, is there always a core to who you are that you're drawn to certain expression? And so even with the hormonal induced changes, you could feel into like, oh, that's not really what's true to me, even though you gain the ability to be more sensitive. Was that you try it on and you realize that's not your truth? Because I'm really curious, like, is there something really innate in our incarnation, really, that have a certain expression, and everything else is conditioning? Even hormonal treatment can be a form of conditioning. And I don't know. I'm just curious about your experience.
Yeah, Doruk, is it okay if I just respond there?
Of course. I think
Yeah.
these are very specific questions to you.
Okay.
I can reflect
Yeah.
based on your responses.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. Okay. Well, the short answer is yes, there is a me there, regardless of the vehicle that I'm renting. Like this body it's a rental. We're using it for, I don't know, 80 to 150 years. We'll see how long we can keep these things running, or if we want to keep them running for too long. And that, self-isolation versus self as collective. But there was for me always a thread that is immutable, and that's preferences, right? Like my sexuality never changed, for example. I've always been interested in females. There's other interests and passions, and and just the structures. We can talk about nature, nurture, but what I think is necessary in the world based on what I see as successful and what I see as lacking, or what I can see as less efficient or harmful, or what could be optimized. There's always those insights, which never changed. The ways in which I communicated them did, because the body I was communicating through did change. So it just became like different language to say the same thing. And that language is based on the operating system that's rooted in the body, and the operating system of the body is informed by our senses and our literal somatic existence. So when that shifts, then the syntax, the grammar, and the descriptions we use to communicate shifted. But I was always interested in the same things. I pretty much wore the same clothes. It's like jeans and a t-shirt, right? I still was riding bikes and building bikes. It was very, very, very similar. I did get a little bit caught up in the zeitgeist of ideology and got swept up in that. And I think there was a big point in 2020 where I realized I had assembled a life that I externally referenced, thought I would want or thought I should want, as opposed to the one that I maybe, if I go inward, actually wanted. And that was one of the catalysts for stopping hormones, was because it was clouding my ability to remember what's true to me. And there was a big process around that. But ultimately, I'm the same person through and through. I think that when you're sourcing belonging from an identity group that has strict politics around participation, it can be hard to go against the grain, even if it's true to you. And the cost of disagreeing with the trans community is pretty high. Pretty easy to cancel anybody that has a divergent opinion over things like victim and creator, things like agency versus compliance, and those threads came up through spiritual work, and no longer feeling a victim, feeling very empowered in my agency, was threatening to all the others who were very rooted in having been oppressed by their embodiment and oppressed by their medical choices. And I didn't resonate with that and never did. So that created some distance. And ultimately, I think that for anybody, trans or not, if there's a attachment to victim or oppression, there will be some external forces that bias their moral compass and their decision making. And I experience that as true, despite having been the same person throughout.
Yeah.
Wow. Fascinating.
I had a couple reflections on my side, if that's okay, I would like to share.
Yeah.
So first of all, I think it's a personal perspective, but the soul dimension has the integration of both. And although I might not have gone through the physical experience that you have gone through, Koda, I think what I was trying to say is that we all have the embodiment of both energies in us. So I can definitely speak from my own experiences. And literally, when I look into my life, my definition for beauty, coming back to introduction, is literally that unity and diversity. And to me, it's the integration of feminine and masculine energies in a healthy and sustainable human manner too. And when I look into my own life, I like the way that you describe operating system differences, because that's how I describe too. To me, it's also heart and the mind. I feel like mind is more masculine, like divisive, strategic, fragmented, and piece by piece thinking. And the feminine aspect is a lot more heart-centered, more unity, more fluid, and more natural. And to me, when I look into my life, I was mostly in the operating system of the mind in the earlier stages of my life, through my Western education system, through the way that I had to show up in business, because that was pretty much what was modeled and what was acceptable. And when I realized that when I'm in that mind system, it was a total different kind of operating model where I bring most of my masculine energies into the world. And when I said in the introduction, I was more of the artistic child, I had that innate femininity in me, but for a long time, that part has been so neglected that I had to consciously remind myself that I am lacking that unity. And I had so much external reflections of that in my personal life that consciously over the last 10 years, I have been integrating that feminine dimension back into my life. And that literally brought that poetic side of me, that dancer side of me, that more human side of me back to the business too. And I personally started integrating both of those different operating models. And to me, the beauty is literally that integration. How can you bring that heart and the mind dimension together? See the holistic unity that we all share, but have your significant difference and the way that you are going to bring that unity into the world, because no one has the same perspective that you have in this world. No one has gone through the same experiences that you have gone through in this body with your background. So that's the diversity part. And I think we all have those dualities in us. And my personal invitation is really, how can I bring more of that integrity in me, bring that embodiment into my own body? And hopefully from that, if something is emerging, I can give back to the world. And hopefully I can create from that wholeness. And it has been a personally challenging integration journey. And what I realized was really how much of that heart-centered living is lacking in the world. And how I'm so forced to shame myself for some of that feminine dimension. So, for example, like routines and stuff like that, like this masculine hierarchical army style thing that I tortured myself quite a long time because I want to be effective and productive. Right now, I am even more productive, but my rhythm is so different. It's a flowy in nature. Like I still have some aspirations to bring more material things into the world, but I don't really put things into my calendar saying that at 9 a.m. you're going to do this. It depends on how I feel that particular day. And it depends on how my body feels and what my body's needs are. And to me, it's a beautiful integration of welcoming a different kind of rhythm, a lot more space, a lot more unity into my life while still having that masculine drive to bring more material things, achieve things in life, or bring that vision into the world, which requires some dedication and commitment. And with that, actually, what I am currently focusing on is really how can we bring more of that feminine aspects into the business too? Because I also feel like coming back to our power demonstration or so much masculine power being dominant in the business world, I also feel like we are creating, again, this love concept, like living organizations valuing existence. We are creating dead organizations. Like there is nothing living that doesn't die, except the corporations, except the products, which are ever growing all the time, which is not natural at all. It's just clearly showing us that what we are creating is not sustainable. What we're creating is not a living existence that requires some holding space, some pauses, some alignment with nature, some integration time. And that's one of the things that's really also making my heart blossom. Like, how can we bring a little bit more space, a little bit more of this feminine qualities back to the business, so we can also have a little bit more integration time, and we are not sacrificing so much of the masculine energies, but bringing more of the balance and hopefully supporting each other. What does this mean for you, or do you see any kind of resonance in your experiences? Like Elsa, we kept you quite on the silent side quite a long time.
I was just looking at God showing up at your window. The light just like it's like a Renaissance painting. Isn't it beautiful? It's just all is holy. All is holy. It resonates so much that kind of referencing what Kodah was saying and what's landing for me when I hear him share as a response to my curiosity is like, there's some part of us is us. It's not gender, like the cultural gender definition. It's like innately us. And it finds its expression in the vehicles that it's in. It can be male, female, or in between. Like, just there's no one way of expressing that truth. And Daruk, your invitation to imagine this future, and it's just what's coming up to me is like this prayerful thought that, what if the next person walk up to the so-called battlefield pitch stage is someone who's connected to their truth of who they are, and they express it all like completely authentic, and it really doesn't matter whether the audience thought it was, whatever they think. But I think something will resonate if like our intention is to just connect with that truth. When you were not connected to your truth in your earlier corporate career, you knew, but you didn't have really a way to access that dance and artistic side, and now you found it, and your heart is blossoming, like you said. You know, what if life is about our hearts blossoming together?
Yes.
And yeah, I think in a way, part of my mind's asking, like, how do you do that? And part of me just like, well, let's just live that, like, ourselves, you know, the three of us and those who are listening. Like, what does the next moment bring to us in which we can express our truest self without the need to belong to a certain group of behavior? Because you walk up the pitch stage and they're trying to belong to this archetypal unicorn CEO, and that belonging is taking us away from our truth. And I don't know, maybe something resonate, because I many years ago when I started studying Buddhism, I was like sharing with my Buddhist teacher. I was like, so you guys don't really preach, not like the, you know, the way I experienced Christianity over time. And they're like, no, when you're enlightened, people want to find out how you do it. You don't have to tell them, they come to you. And so I was like, you know, what if there's a fully embodied, fully integrated person step out into the world without asking what it looks like to be this person, because they already know? Then others would be like, well, how did you do that? What is that? What is that? And I hope, I pray this is the future we're stepping into. But both of you who are coaching founders, you know, this is that space that they're opening up and making possible right now, is to not to ask, what does a female unicorn CEO look like, or male, or it's like, what does the best version of myself look like doing this work that I'm called to do?
Yeah.
Wow. Do you have something to add, Koda?
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm
please.
getting this best version of ourself. What does that look like? And we're talking about an inner technology. We're talking about the heart, and uh, you know, to be deeply human is to have touched that. And when we learn how to touch and be with our heart, or our inner technology, I call it our core technology, then our dharma unfolds and our gifts flow to those that are here to meet them. And it's really remembering life is working through us. Life is having a human experience through us. And in fact, well, that life is just light, right? So just light is flowing through us. So the more inner reflection we do, the more of that flows through us, the more people we attract who are here to serve, right? And if that light isn't shining and people meet us, they don't meet the person that they don't meet us. They go right past, right? And that's being that light is all it is, really. And then outside of that, we look at the world, and I don't know how much non-dualism has come into the container, but really that nothingness, that unnameable, that's already always doing, it's already always happening all around us. Nothing is already happening, right? So there's nothing to do, because it's already happening all around us. All the nothing that could ever be not done. So we're literally just meant to clean the mirror, clear the mirror, clean the mirror over and over again, and just watch life flow through us, which then looks like being the person who we are when those we're supposed to meet arrive. And that's all it is. I can create a whole bunch of words about the offerings that I have, but really it's when I listen to a potential client or someone I can help, or a business leader or business, then I can hear them, indicate that I've heard them, and then talk about what is next, and what we can be together. And it's not me saying this is the product, here it is, package it, let's build a funnel around it. It's really being able to be with those who are coming and arriving to us.
Beautiful. By now, you might realize that I do like this infinity symbol that really brings two things together. The way that I symbolize what both of you nicely articulated is literally this eternal creation and reflection. Creation and reflection. Like, as an individual, I embody all the principles, all that unity that I would like to see more in the world. And how can I really create that in my own circle, like share it with love, and hopefully let life to reflect back who is attracted to that message. At least that's the way that we are meeting right now, Elsa. Like, literally, me like speaking with Kodah is just another extension of that. When I started this journey, it was just an extension of what was emerging in my heart. I started writing some articles, And that attracted a couple more people who would like to talk about love and business side by side. And then that literally created this little small coherence within a little small community of people who shares the same values. And to me, how can you really embody the things that you would like to see more in the world? Create that reflection and hopefully reflect and see what is emerging in life. That's the co-creation with life. You are a part of the world. You are shaping it with how you live your life, how you embody the principles, how you create the life that you would like to see. But it's also a reflection to see what life is mirroring back to you, and how can you make this dance of co-creation. Create and reflect, create and reflect. One part is you as a leader creating the life, but also the other part is really humbling yourself and knowing that in some sense you are at dust little small point in the ocean, but yeah, you are the ocean too. Like, how can you hold those two conflicting paradoxes at the same time? Which
I love
is
that image of the ocean. It brought back my intention of like, today I'm a mother, I'm a sanctuary. And like literally a sanctuary is something that can hold anything. And that inner sanctuary is what I believe the world is praying for right now.
yes,
That we can hold whatever that comes up outside, which is really a reflection that goes back here. And so perhaps like this leader and the sanctuary, like they can both be there. And I mean, I'm just thinking about a lot of there's a lot of victimization that also happens, with founders who feel victimized by not belonging to the right gender category. At the same time, I believe the investors are not the bad guys either. And so, when you brought back this love, this sanctuary, this ocean, like, how can those of us who are the seeds of change can also bring more love and compassion into the holders of wealth and power in the system currently? That they're just doing whatever they're doing to increase their happiness, to reduce their pain, to keep learning about life. And they're just being with whatever condition that was given. Because I think the more victimization, then there's just more violence that we do to ourselves. And this love, this sanctuary is part of it. How can I find my own inner sanctuary if I am pitching to someone and I feel that I'm being objectified? Where is that sanctuary within me? So I can tune back to myself instead of stepping into a victim. And I think that's where the love comes in. And that's maybe where the healing comes in, is through business.
Yeah.
and I don't want to really pass over a point that I would like to make regarding how we were talking about pitching and how we are sometimes just becoming a data point in the lines of pitch decks and stuff like that. To me, this is nicely linked back to what you said, that embodiment, that integration. I think that is the superpower that we all have as individuals. Like, we all have unique stories. And as a founder, as an innovator, as a creator, if something in you ignites that passion in your heart and you would like to turn that into a company, a product, a creation, this really means that you have that power in you. You have that creative power in you. Your authentic story is the most unique differentiating thing that you can give back to the world. And sometimes this is, Kodah, to your point about humanizing our business. We treat everything, again, too much masculine energy. It's like a data point in an Excel sheet kind of thing. The same is true for pitch decks. Like, there are like 100 companies, like you only have 1 minute elevator pitch, and it's a different kind of playground. Again, operating system. I think the operating system that emerges from heart emerges in the form of authentic stories that's already there. And as founders, how can we really speak that truth? First, embody that truth, like literally eliminate all of the barriers that really make us feel like I have to be like that and like that to be accepted to this VC round in this particular shape or form, because that's what they care. Like, who cares about what they care? Like, can you just literally eliminate all of the barriers that's really making you question your own self-worth, self-value? And then can you just be the embodiment of that creator in you, which you know is there if you have that passion in your heart. Because if you are not capable of bringing it to the world, you wouldn't dream about it. And to me, the most important thing is really for any founders, like how can you be the embodiment of that authenticity, that authentic message that you carry with pride, with love, with intention, and can you share your story? And then hopefully you will connect to the right funders. And maybe your story will open up the hearts of the people too. To me, that's again like if you can just touch with a founder's heart with your own story, maybe it's gonna create ripple effects along the journey. Kodah, you want to say something?
Yeah,
Please?
that piece about the heart of the funder, actually, I got to be an investor too. And it was so interesting when all of these passionate, driven founders came looking for seed capital and whatnot, even if they didn't fit our thesis. It was, you still just are driven to want to help. And then a lived experience that I had was, when I was leading my own company looking for investment, I had deep connections with some of these potential investors, and then I didn't know how to navigate that energy, and sometimes it was more personal and less professional, and then those personal things, I learned a lot. I got to see them as real people and their struggles, and it humanized them for me. And then inversely, when I was in the investor seat and an entrepreneur was coming to me, it was not a fit. But then we were at the same age, and it was our social event, one of the Summit Series events. We had a great time dancing and everything. And then, we after the evening ends, we're hanging out, and I'm thinking we're having a deep connection. But when I actually just asked, is this real, or is this there's other motivations for you? Are you focused on the check, or are we actually having a real connection? And then she said, no, I just thought you were going to be an investor. And it kind of, it hurt in a way that I didn't know, like, oh, this is the responsibility that's always going to be here. If I'm seen as the one that could fund their dreams, then they're always going to bias towards that. And it felt like I was suddenly not a person in her eyes. I was suddenly just a check. And it was a really interesting opportunity for me to kind of clear the karma and be like, oh, wow, did I do this to other investors? Did I look at them as just a paycheck and not a real person, not a real friend? And because that was what I was experiencing from this person. And I just wanted to just drop that in. Just remember, like, investors are people, and they're also entrepreneurs too. Like, they have to raise money too. And it's not like they're just sitting there with a pool of resources to deploy. They're people with relationships and families, and they're real people. So, like, let's just be people together.
Yep. Thank you for bringing two sides of the story together, which nicely complements. And our intention is not to victimize anything in here. I think what we are highlighting, if there's one thing that we have to underline here, I think it's authenticity. How can we bring more of our authentic selves and make connections in the world from that level ground? So hopefully we can find the right people who will support the same purpose that we would like to see more in the world. To me, that's the alignment piece. And it's not about judging for anything and everything. We all have different visions. We all have different purposes. You can be on the founder side. You can be on the funder side. To me, the most important thing is alignment of that intention, that embodiment of more of the principles that we would like to see in the world. And can both sides be as authentic as they are? But I think we might not have time in this conversation, but this might be another invitation for the other one. Currently, I am actually educating myself so much about the different world where we are redefining how we do transactions in today's world. Like, how can we redefine money in a different way, getting more inspiration from nature? And Kodah, you mentioned this, like maybe this is also a judgment we put on that business interactions, which is always dehumanized. And when we say professional, again, like we are dehumanizing so much that it's always end goal oriented, that there is no humanity in it. It's just a transaction. And I was able to see this in my networks when I especially moved to New York, coming from a more Middle Eastern culture where we still have so much social values. I was shocked the way that I see people were interacting in the business world. And some of them I had some social context to, and they were clearly segmenting the way that they do business, which is very transactional, as if they're interacting with a machine. And they were saying, no, this is the way that I network because the purpose is clear, like this is for business purposes. So it's like literally I'm just shutting down my human dimension, my emotion, my vulnerability, everything that makes me human, my heart, first of all, like close it, leave it at the door, and then I do business. And then you see these networking events where people just check in the boxes, like, oh, let me see who has the highest title, who serves my purpose. And to me, this was like, oh my God, such a cultural shock, because how we live life in the culture that I was coming from was a lot more integrated. Maybe it's because of the nature of the communal spirit. Again, just a cultural observation, but we can take it to so many different verticals that could have implications in terms of how we do business and what money means, which is just transactional thing that dehumanizes any kind of connection too. How can we maybe rethink about that? How can we bring more of the gifts that we innately transact with each other and then make it a little bit more relational instead of this transactional thing, which we see more in the world? But I think it's a deep, deep, deep topic, but very relevant to most of the things that we are discussing.
Oh, I see the theme of the next podcast is how do we detransactionalize the world? Because I think a lot of the sorry, but
please.
I think maybe some of the grievances of people who have a grievance, and I used to, about capitalism isn't so much capitalism. Maybe it's about the transactional nature of some of the activities that capitalism brought on. And, is capitalism necessarily bad? If we're imagining it, could we see the parts that can be more human? Stakeholder capitalism, same thing. Like, where can we bring it more in line with our values? And maybe transaction isn't a human nature. You just watch nature documentaries, there are no transactions. Anyway, that could be an interesting
Yeah.
Kodah, you have something to share?
Yeah, there's a thread there. There's a sect of Hinduism that talks about transaction very differently, where they look at that word and try to clean it a little bit. But essentially, we're always in transaction with the elements. They do things like cold exposure, heat exposure, and it's always in transaction with nature, constantly movement of aspects between entities. And it's like we're already in transaction. It's just the flow of life. It's just happening. It just is there's a little bit of an irritation. We have to quantify what's happening. But the fact that we're in relationship is transaction, and that's not bad. People looking at relationship and taking transaction out of it. It's like, no, we're always in relation. We're always giving, receiving, taking. That's constantly flowing in a circle, and that's always happening. It's just when we want to quantify it that it gets complex and messy, and that's bringing in a different part of our brain into an area where the heart was already flowing. So if there was just some kind of more automated or more clear way to just have objectivity, I feel more comfortable. And then the relationships are first, friends first, community first, and whatever transactions happen, just knowing that they're going to happen in a way that works. And there's not going to be all this outmaneuvering and over leveraging to have really extractive transactions. That's if we can hedge against the dark side of transactions and just make transactions a clean and clear word again, I think it has a place.
It might be just differences in the way that we use terminology, and I might be biased with some of the terminology that I borrowed from the book that I'm currently reading. You might already know, Sacred Economy. I just literally started reading it yesterday. And to me, I think the difference was really between the intentions, and one of them is more intentionally more coming from a more balanced feminine energy. Like I said, that unity consciousness, that relation really unites us in that sense. And transaction, or the way that we business, has nothing to do with that unity. It's like you give and I give back. And to me, that was the fragmented way of operating in today's world. Otherwise, it's always give and take. But I think what really differentiates that give and take is literally, are you embodying a spirit in that give and take with that unity consciousness? To me, that was the significant difference that I see between transaction and that more of the relational aspect of gifting, or like literally sharing something from the depths of your heart. And that was actually one of the core themes in the book, which resonated so much for me. Like, we are dehumanizing business, we are dehumanizing money too. Like, you are not giving anything from yourself. It's literally a commodity. In the old world, I think people were exchanging things in a more humane, more gifted, more spiritual way too. Like, when I am sharing something, I'm sharing a piece of me, a different side of me. So it was really, again, individualized and authentic in different shape or form. But with money, seeing money this way, it's so commoditized that, similar to like me being an employee, which is a data point in an Excel sheet, like, it's not really allowing me to bring all of myself in different shape or form. From an ideological point of view, you can see a similar kind of fragmentation and dehumanization and desensitization of our existence through the commoditization. But again, this is not blaming. To Elsa's point, there are so much benefits for the global economy to operate with some common terminology. The invitation here is really, how can we keep that global spirit for expansion, for us having a global language so we can have more relational exchanges, hopefully. But there are also quite a lot of things that we can improve from this purely transactional, dehumane point of view. So my question at this point, or the intention that I'm holding, is really, how can we keep the good parts for scaling things in a global fashion and having a common language that can help human interactions to happen? But how can we bring more of the humanity back to money and the way that we interact with money too? It's an energy exchange. It's a value exchange. Does it always have to be dehumanized in the way it is today?
Very well said.
Well, this could be another invitation for next conversation. I know we blocked time till 2:30 p.m., which gives us almost like last 2 or 3 minutes. Any final words or reflections?
Well, I'm very grateful to have had the space to be with you two women, and your intelligence and your hearts really showed in the conversation. Thank you for holding space for my contributions. And yeah, I would love to reach out to anybody that felt resonance. I have ears, will listen. And kodahpip.com is my personal site where things all funnel through. And I'm really focusing. I just got back from 7 days in Utah in the canyons doing this whole outdoor leadership with the Flow Genome Project, and really life-changing. That's one of the main vehicles that I'm operating through these days. And if you have a company that's looking to integrate your culture towards this concept of unity that we've discussed today, I'd be happy to listen and see how I can help. And I'd love to keep this dialogue going after the podcast in any way that makes sense.
Perfect. Thank you, Kodah. Elsa.
Thank you for both of you and for this beautiful sanctuary that we created today, for us to hold all the chaos of this world and not trying to make sense of it and just trying to feel love for it. That's how I'm feeling resonance of how we're tuning into that and not having an agenda or an outcome that we, plan and execute, and just, I feel like this flow is beautiful, and I really look forward to more conversations on and off camera with all of you. And I just have so much faith in us together that we are journeying towards the same places.
I agree. And thank you for reminding the beauty of art of conversation. So to me, that's another concept so dear to my heart. I just realized that we are losing bets in today's world. And when I even see podcasts, it's always like someone interviewing someone else. But to me, the most beautiful thing is this natural flow. The way that I define is really art of conversation. Like, you say something and that triggers something in me. I just make a contribution, then Kodah makes another contribution. And to me, this is really co-creation as human beings. It's not someone asking questions and interviewing the other person. It's literally us, to the extent that it's possible, bringing all of our authentic selves to this present moment and holding the space for whatever is supposed to emerge from the space. And it always turns out to be beautiful, aligned with that feature that we would like to see more in the world. So I just would like to thank you for being the embodiment for these principles and being here with me and becoming a part of this co-creation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
To be
Thank
continued.
you.